In 2018, there weren't that many premium all-electric SUVs, and indeed the Jaguar I-Pace stood out. But in 2022, we're littered with options. So in this review, you're going to see how it compares to its modern rivals, and furthermore, if it's actually worth its price tag. Because the I-Pace starts from £65,000, and with the HSE trim that we have on review with the options fitted on top, it comes in at a whopping £79,000. If you'd like a detailed breakdown between the different trim levels and as to what you get as standard, do check out our detailed written review. It'll be down in the description below. Now, given its premium price tag, one might expect a luxurious exterior design, and quite frankly, I think Jaguar have achieved it with the I-Pace. See, from the front, it's got that kind of aggressive look, and it's almost somewhat reminiscent to the XJ220, whereby its flared sort of bonnet and wings give it that sort of sportier edge. As for its side profile, you're treated with 18 to 22 inch alloys which you can choose from, and the body coloured wheel arches and side skirts give it that sort of premium extra feel. Speaking of which, here you've also got door handles which are concealed within the frame of the vehicle and prop open when the car is unlocked. A small little touch, but one is definitely appreciated. As for the rear profile of the vehicle, you've got that Jaguar-esque finish, from its tail light design to yet again this aggressive sort of look, specifically given the fact that it's got that integrated spoiler at the top of the vehicle. Now, as we transition inside the cabin, the vehicle still oozes class, with a choice of materials around the dashboard to the seat upholstery and even the door frames. Everything just looks the part, at least subjectively. Now, what takes center stage is the actual technology implementation in the 2022 model of the I-Pace. Here you've got a 10-inch display which supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, both in a wired and wireless format. Now, other than the third-party operating systems, I should also mention that the menu layout of the I-Pace is a little bit convoluted. It takes a little while when you're transitioning between certain menus, and for example, the regenerative braking selection can't be quickly accessed through the steering wheel or via a button. You'll just have to faff around with the vehicle settings, which I just don't find as intuitive as some of its rivals. Nevertheless, if you go for one of the more premium trims, what you'll find is a secondary 5-inch display. This is dedicated for climate controls, and I think it does exactly what it says on the tin. If you do want this on the standard level trim, you'll have to pay around £410. Now, what I do like around this area is the fact that Jaguar has integrated a multi-functional rotary dials, both for the passenger side and the driver side. It allows you to adjust the fan speed, the climate controls, and of course to play around with the heated seats which come as standard in every level trim. It just makes the usability and the functionality of it far superior than some of its rivals that opt for a fully digitalized input instead, and well, it's certainly appreciated to keep the kind of retro design in this aspect. Now, on the subject of its climate controls, I should mention that the PM 2.5 filter comes in at an additional £150, and similarly, if you want the wireless charging pad for your smartphone, which can be found just underneath the climate control settings, you will have to pay an additional £305, which frankly I think is ridiculous given that the overall asking price of the vehicle. Now, what does come as standard on the plus side is a fully digitalized instrument cluster, and here the 12.3-inch display gives you all the right information that you require and can be customized to a very certain degree, but is nowhere near in terms of the level of customization that you can find in the likes of, let's say, the Audi or Volvo alternatives. Now, before we transition off the use of technology, I should also reference the audio system, and for those who are subscribed, you'll know I do dedicated audio reviews of every vehicle I get in, and indeed there's one for the Jaguar I-Pace. It'll be up on your pop-up banner, down description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, as standard in the S and SE trims, you'll get the Meridian audio system that outputs 400 watts and has 12 speakers, which also includes a subwoofer. If, however, you want to upgrade to the 3D audio system from Meridian, you'll have to shell out £610. In the HSE trim, however, this comes as standard, and it will give you 17 speakers that output up to 750 watts. As mentioned, do check out the dedicated audio reviews for a lot more details about this, but what I will say in a nutshell is that I was expecting a little bit more from the most premium Meridian audio system within the Jaguar I-Pace. So now we get on to storage, and first off, let's talk about what you get within the cabin. Now, at the front, you've got a small little sunglass compartment, which I find quite handy, and it's very similar to what you'd find in other Land Rover vehicles, and then you've got the glove compartment. As for the door bins, the front two are large enough for a 500ml bottle to fit alongside smaller valuables, while the rear two are a little bit more limited. Towards the center console, I did previously reference the wireless charging pad. Of course, if you don't go for this option, you'll have a non-slip bay instead, which is large enough for a small-sized or large-sized smartphone. Further down, you've got a little area where it allows you to prop your phone upwards, vertically or horizontally, or if you do wish to place your key fob or some pens over here, it's a small little handy storage. Further down, you've got two cup holders, and then you've got the center armrest compartment, which might not seem large at first, but it's not until you open it up that you'll realize that you can easily fit a medium to large size purse and or a wallet, alongside some other valuables, such as, let's say, some sunglasses or a small size bottle. Over here, you'll also find a 12-volt socket should you want to plug in, let's say, a dash cam. Our favorite roundup will be down description below, where you can find some of the best dash cams on the market. And then elsewhere, you've got a USB Type-C and Type-A ports, which are useful for connecting up to the infotainment system via a wired format. Now, of course, as far as storage is concerned, there is boot capacity. Now, in the SE and the HSE model, you have got a powered tailgate that is fitted as standard. And unfortunately, that isn't as standard in the regular S model, which is quite a shame given the fact that the vehicle starts from £65,000. Nevertheless, in the HSE model that we have on review, it can be operated by pressing a button just above the number plate. When it's a little bit dirty, you can get your hands a little bit mucky, but on the plus side, you can operate it via the included remote or via a button found within the cabin. Now, when it does open up, you have got a great sort of design. At least subjectively, I'm just under 6 foot and I can fit underneath the boot lid, and means that I can just fit in goods in and out without any problem. Speaking of which, you do not have a raised boot lip, which makes it even easier. And furthermore, be it with a 60-40 or a 40-20-40 split, which you can add in as an additional option, it means that loading goods, specifically elongated ones, is a breeze. Now elsewhere, you do have a flat loading bay, making it all that bit more convenient. And furthermore, to store away your charging cables, you can conceal them within the underfloor compartment storage, which is fitted as standard in every level trim in the Jaguar I-Pace. Now, as for total capacity, you've got a whopping 656 litres to play around with, and with the seats propped down, you've got 1,453 litres. That makes it better than a lot of its rivals, although not as large as the Skoda Enyaq iV or the larger Audi e-tron. Now, in the Jaguar I-Pace, you do also have a frontal storage compartment, although it's quite limited and therefore allows you to store maybe 1 or 2 shopping bags at most, or for example, your charging cables. The only thing to note over here is that it's not electronically operated, and as a result makes it a little less convenient if you're frequenting it. Now, despite its somewhat compact look from the exterior of the vehicle, the interior of the cabin is actually pretty spacious. I'm just under 6 foot and I've got no issues when it comes to headroom at the rear or at the front of the cabin, and similarly when it comes to legroom. The only thing to bear in mind is that if you do have very long legs and you're sat at the rear, is that due to the kind of diagonally wedged rear seats, it means that your quad muscles or hamstrings might get a little bit tired. Now, if you're not going to use the rear middle seat, you can pull it down, in other words, to reveal an armrest, or of course you've got 2 cup holders. As for convenience, you've also got a 12-volt socket for charging at the rear of the center console, and then 2 USB Type-C ports as well. Now, at the front of the cabin, you have heated front seats that come as standard in all trim levels. You've also got an 8-way semi-electronically adjustable front seat in the S trim. Now, in the SE trim, this moves up to a 12-way electric controls, and in the HSE trim, you've got 16-way electronic controls plus heated and cooled seats, which is definitely useful on hotter summer days. Now, speaking of which, here in terms of the sun that you might be getting in certain countries, here the glass panoramic roof isn't fitted as standard. It comes in at around £995 option, no matter which trim level you go for, which is quite a shame because I would have liked to see it as standard, specifically in the most expensive HSE trim. And so now we get on to driving, and first off I have to talk about visibility. And here at the front and at the side of the cabin, I've got no issues whatsoever. It's easy to peer over the relatively short bonnet, and as for the side, the way that Jaguar have designed the A-pillars and the front windows makes it easy to check over my blind spot, or for example when I'm taking corners, let's say around a roundabout, it makes it easy to see, let's say, if there's a cyclist approaching. Now, the same couldn't be quite said about the rear view window, because it's a lot more limited in terms of visibility. Furthermore, when it is dirty, or for example it's raining and you're not going at speed and therefore utilizing the aerodynamics of the vehicle, it means that, well, the rear view window does get get dirty and or is a little bit harder to see past. Now thankfully Jaguar have integrated a rear view camera as standard, and therefore gives you a bit more peace of mind when you are reversing. So with visibility out of the way, what about when it comes to driving comfort? Well, here as standard, the Jaguar I-Pace comes with a passive suspension setup. If, however, you want to go for the adaptive electric suspension, then you'll have to dish out an additional £1,120, and that's exactly what we have fitted on the model on review. Now, what I will say here is, despite the adaptive suspension presumably doing a better job than the passive suspension setup, it's still a little bit stiff. Specifically, if you compare it to the likes of the larger Audi e-tron SUV, it's nowhere near as soft when you're going over potholes, rougher terrain, or let's say speed bumps. Here, the Jaguar I-Pace is a bit more likened to the likes of the VW ID.4, the Skoda Enyaq iV, the likes of the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, and is arguably a little bit softer in comparison to the BMW iX3 and the Mercedes EQA. Now, having just referenced the BMW iX3, this perfectly leads me on to the overall driver's feel of the Jaguar I-Pace. And here it's got a fantastic steering input, a responsive accelerator pedal, at least when you are on the dynamic driving mode, because here the normal and eco modes will make it a lot mushier and doesn't give you that same sort of one-to-one driving aspect. And furthermore, the driving position that you get in the Jaguar I-Pace makes it almost feel like I'm driving a saloon. It is almost comparable to the likes of the Polestar 2, the Audi e-tron GT, or the likes of the Tesla Model 3. It doesn't make me feel like I'm driving a slightly higher rise vehicle, and Jaguar should really be commended for that. And this makes it, well, quite fun to drive, specifically if you're taking it on windy country roads. Now similarly, it's pretty rapid if you were to put your foot down to the metal, because I had it tested from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.8 seconds. And while this isn't as rapid as the likes of the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, nor the quoted claims from Jaguar itself, which claim that the vehicle will get to 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, I think it will definitely suffice for a lot of consumers. Now this is thanks to the Jaguar I-Pace operating on a dual motor configuration, and this also means that it's got an all-wheel drive system that's always in operation, giving you again a little bit of extra know-how and a bit more extra confidence when you are driving around more slippery roads. Now combined, the two motors output 294 kilowatts of power, which equates to 394 horsepower, and this also means that you got 696 newton meters of readily available torque. And just in case you're wondering, top speed is limited to 124 miles an hour, which will suffice for most individuals, specifically for those of us who live in the UK. But if you want unrestricted roads and therefore you have the ability to go, well, pretty much unlimited, then you might be left a little bit disappointed by the overall top speed of the Jaguar I-Pace. Now, while its performance traits are pretty impressive, I was very much intrigued to see how well it would do when it comes to range. And this is because Jaguar have integrated a large 90 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is among one of the largest that one can find in an all-electric SUV. And here I was actually somewhat surprised to find it not actually achieve a higher amount of mileage. See, it doesn't seem to be as efficient as some of its newer competitors, which house a much smaller battery pack. Nevertheless, here, in comparison to the roughly 270 to 280 mile claim that the manufacturer has, I actually attained 240 to 250 miles from my mixed driving test, which makes it on par with the likes of the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, slightly better than the likes of the Mercedes EQA, and a lot better than the larger Audi e-tron SUV. However, in comparison to the likes of the Audi Q4 e-tron, the VW ID.4, the Skoda Enyaq iV, the likes of the Kia e-Niro, the Hyundai Kona Electric, the Kia Soul EV, it is not as good, whereby most of these vehicles achieve north of 260 miles, at least according to my own mixed driving tests. Suffice to say that the Jaguar I-Pace will definitely suffice when it comes to range, but it's not exactly class leading, despite it housing a relatively large sized battery pack. Now, for you to reattain energy back into the battery packs, you can of course use regenerative braking, where one can attain it by pressing down on the physical brake pedal, and of course, given it's an electric vehicle, you can lift off the accelerator pedal and therefore let the Jaguar I-Pace automatically decelerate. Now, there are two modes to choose from, where you've got low and high, and even in its highest mode, I don't think it's harsh enough to really give you that one pedal driving approach. Now, yes, the I-Pace can be brought to a complete standstill by just simply lifting off the accelerator pedal, but you'll need a significant amount of distance, so much so that you're probably going to resort to using the physical brake pedal. Here, what I'm trying to say is that in comparison to the likes of, let's say, the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, which truly gives you a good one-pedal driving approach, the same couldn't be said about the Jaguar I-Pace. It is still a little bit harsher in terms of regenerative braking in comparison to its Volkswagen counterparts, such as, for example, from Audi, Volkswagen, or even Skoda, where they integrate around 0.3 Gs of deceleration, whereas the Jaguar I-Pace integrates around 0.4 Gs of deceleration, making it a little bit better when it comes to lifting off your accelerator pedal and therefore really coming to a complete standstill. Now, of course, being an electric vehicle, you can plug it in, and here the Type 2 and CCS ports are found towards the front wing on the passenger side. Now, the CCS port will give you up to 100 kilowatts of input, meaning that you can go from 0 to 80% in around 45 minutes. Should you find a more commonly found 50 kilowatt input, it will take around 1.5 hours. Now, the new Jaguar I-Pace has a 11 kilowatt onboard charger, and therefore if you have access to a 3-phase power supply, it'll take around 8.5 hours to go from 0 to 100%. If you go for a 7 kilowatt input and therefore don't have 3-phase power supply, it'll take roughly 12 to 13 hours. And by the way, if you're going for a 3-pin input, it'll take over 30 hours to go from empty to full. Now, finally, when it comes to the driver assistance systems, the Jaguar I-Pace seems to be a little bit strived for standardized features. See, you will get cruise control, lane assist, and the traffic sign recognition system, among a few other basic features that one might expect in a modern vehicle, but nothing else. If you want the lane positioning assistant and therefore steering assist, you want adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring system, the rear cross traffic alert, among a few other features, you're going to have to pay an additional premium, which in my opinion isn't quite justified given the fact that we are spending over £70,000 on the Jaguar I-Pace. And so this brings me on to my verdict. Can I see myself actively recommending the Jaguar I-Pace in 2022? Well, there are some alternatives that you should really consider. The Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro offers pretty much the same sort of package as the I-Pace, except it comes in at £50,000. The Audi Q4 e-tron doesn't have the same sort of driving dynamics as the Volvo or the Jaguar, but comes in at £45,000 while offering a same sort of premium interior feel and furthermore bettered range. Speaking of which, if you want even more range, the Skoda Enyaq iV offers that and also gives you better boot capacity. Look past these vehicles and you want better driving dynamics, you've got the BMW iX3, which also coincidentally also comes in cheaper than the I-Pace. Elsewhere, past the premium badges, as one might say, you've got the Hyundai Kona Electric, the Kia Soul EV and the Kia e-Niro, all of which offer a compelling package that one might want to consider at roughly £32,000 to around £45,000. Now, of course, that's just our subjective opinion, and we'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below as to if and why you'd pick the Jaguar I-Pace over its rivals, which fundamentally we think is just a bit too expensive to actively recommend. Now, if you've liked this detailed independent review, we'd very much appreciate you dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification if you haven't already. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.